Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining in our webinar with Life and Death Wellness. My name is Kimberly Schuler. I am an advanced practice registered nurse, and I sit on the board of Life and Death Wellness. We are a 501c3 nonprofit located in Kapa'au, Hawaii. And our mission is to support our community and through chronic illness and end-of-life issues, and help provide more support and resources for community members who are in those circumstances, as well as their families. Today, we are excited to have Hope Young here with us from Kōkua Mau. I'm sure she'll talk to you a little bit more about it, but Kkua Mau is a movement to improve care for those with serious illness and their loved ones. And they serve all of Hawaii, and they're just a wonderful resource. So thank you, Hope, for being here. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Thanks, Kim.
Sorry, I would say one more thing. Just if you do have questions that come up through the webinar, you can put them in the chat and we can answer those as we go along. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me this evening. As Kim was saying, I'm with Kōkua Mau. We are also a 401c3 nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit, and we are statewide. So we actually have volunteers across the state on every island. We are supported by our members, and our members include individuals, hospices, health plans. We have churches. We have hospitals, we have long-term care organizations. We have all types of organizations out there that actually see the work that we're doing and see how beneficial it can be for the community. And I actually get to work with passionate volunteers across the state. So our program is called Let's Talk Story. Pre-COVID, we would go out there into the community and we'd actually do these presentations in person. But obviously we've had to change the way we present our information. And now we do a lot of Zooming. We like to make sure that people have a chance to be interactive. So I will stop from time to time and check in to see if you have questions. We'll check with the chat box, the chat room, and see, if there's anything that I can answer at the time. So our three areas of activity is we work with people who may be facing serious illness. So I'm gonna throw a question out there. I know I'm not seeing everybody out there. Some of you have your cameras off, but I just like to give you a chance to think about this. Have you ever thought about how you want to die? And if the answer is yes, let me guess. It's either very quickly or in your sleep. Usually those are the two answers that I get. Well, this is why we really want to have these conversations, because only 10% of the population goes out like that. The 90% of the rest of us will possibly be facing serious illness sometimes in our future. So we really want to get this conversation started early. So we also provide professional networking and training. We want to give the tools to the people who are having these conversations on grassroots level. We want everybody to have this opportunity to have these conversations, but we want to train professionals to do these conversations well. And then we also dabble in the system of policy and legislation. If you're familiar with the Pulse form, which is the bright green form, that is something that Kōkua Mau actually has taken ownership of. It lives on our website. Our executive director is also the state Pulse point of contact. So we do like to make sure that we have good resources as well. We like to call ourselves a movement, and we're leading this movement, and it's to make advanced care planning and open communication about care and support for those with serious illness and their loved ones a cultural norm. We want people to be talking about this before they're faced with a health crisis. We really want people to be talking about this while they're healthy, so that they can consider and plan ahead, and it's not so scary when you're faced with a crisis. So how do we do this? Well, we like to use humor. So again, I can't see your faces, but if you're showing your camera, or if you're seeing this, hopefully you're getting a chuckle out of this. I'll give you a minute to see it. And what is advanced care planning? So it's an ongoing process. It's thinking about, it's talking about, it's writing down, it's sharing your healthcare wishes. And this is something that we should be doing on an ongoing basis. So this is not something that should be one and done. This is a conversation that should continue throughout the life cycle. Why is it important? Well, again, I can't see you, but I'm going to ask you to just think about this. No one knows when you're going to become very ill, right? If I have any dementia planners out there in the webinar land, who's planning on having dementia? This is something that, nobody really thinks about, but this really is an opportunity to help your loved ones find your voice if they ever need to speak on your behalf. It ensures that they don't have to guess what you want, because you've had this conversation about what you want, what you don't want, and this eases that burden for your loved ones. In the state of Hawaii, there's no hierarchy, so it doesn't automatically default for your spouse or your adult children or your parents or siblings have the authority to make decisions on your behalf if you're unable to, which is why it's really important to make your choices known. So when it's hurricane season, I'm going to ask you to think about this. What do you do when they announce that there's a potential hurricane coming? Well, if you're like me, you go Costco's or to the store and get water, make sure you're stocked up, make sure you've got batteries, make sure your gas tank is full, make sure you've got enough food, maybe even prep a cooler. We do something, right? We prepare for a hurricane that we're not even sure is going to hit. So why don't we do this for ourselves? The last time I checked, the mortality rate was still at 100%. No one gets out of here alive. So why don't we prepare for that event in the same way we prepare for a hurricane? So one of the tools that I'll be talking about today is from the Conversation Project. And this is one of the Conversation Project is it's a great project that came out of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. The woman pictured, her name, her daughter's name is Ellen Goodman, and Ellen Goodman is a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer. And she found out very early in her mother's diagnosis for early onset dementia that they had not talked about how to care for her during a serious illness or at the end of life. So this was her opportunity to develop some tools to help people have these conversations. Conversation Project is a public engagement campaign, and it's really dedicated to assure that everyone's wishes for end-of-life care are expressed and respected. So if you've ever thought about it, where you want to die, the Conversation Project did a survey a few years back, and these are the responses that they got. So 70% of people that they surveyed want to die at home. They want to be in a familiar setting, surrounded by people that they love. However, 70% are still dying are actually dying in hospitals. Why is there such a disconnect? The same amount of people dying in hospitals are the same amount of people who would rather die at home. So somewhere there is a disconnect. And how do we fix that? So 80% of those same people surveyed say they want to talk to their doctors. However, in the state of Massachusetts, only 17% of people actually did. In California, 7% of people said they did. But 90% of all the people surveyed thinks that these are important conversations to be having. A few years back, Kōkua Mau did a survey, and we asked these same questions. And here in Hawaii, we're above the norm. They're self-reported 30% of people say that they are having these conversations. And while that's above the norm, we've got some room for improvement on that. So Conversation Project, they have a bunch of tools kits, and they've recently changed they've redesigned their toolkits to call them guides. So these are the ideas behind their toolkits: the Conversation Starter Kit for people with dementia, how to be an agent, how to choose an agent, how to talk to your doctor and your healthcare team. They even have one for children with serious illness, the pediatric starter kit. They're all free to download. If you feel one of these speak to you, by all means, go to the Conversation Project or to Kkua Mau's website and have a look. I love this quote from Woody Allen. I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens. I'm right there with you, Woody. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment, and if you'll just take a few deep breaths, maybe close your eyes, and consider this question. What matters to me at the end of life is. Again, we're pondering this question. What matters to me at the end of life is. Where would you be? Who would be there? Are there sounds in the background? Maybe smells in the air? I realize I'm only spending a minute or two on this, but again, what matters to me at the end of life is. You can join us back here at the screen. And if you'll notice, these are the same people that were surveyed by the Conversation Project. These were their answers, or at least the theme for their answers. And you'll notice the biggest one is peaceful, right? Comfortable with family and friends. Easy for my family. If you look really good, you'll notice that none of these responses said in pain or suffering. For the most part, we as humans want to have a positive experience at the end of life. And this is really, how do we get there, right? So what matters to me, some of the responses that were given to the Conversation Project. I want to say goodbye to everyone I love, have one last look at the ocean, listen to some 90s music, and go. Well, you can edit out the 90s music to whatever era suits you best. But if that's how I would be saying goodbye to this world, wow, that actually sounds pretty cool. That sounds, I could get into that. Having my sheets untucked around my feet. I like to point this one out because my mom, when she found herself in the ICU, the nurses would come in and tuck her sheets in around her feet. So she'd be snug as a bug in a rug. And she'd spend the next 10 minutes kicking her feet so that she could get those sheets off her feet. I finally put a sign up behind her and said, please don't tuck my sheets around my feet. I like my feet uncovered. The nurses really appreciated knowing that. Mom appreciated not having, I'm assuming mom appreciated not having to spend her energy trying to untuck her feet. But this is something that mattered to her enough that I wanted to make sure that her nurses knew how to take good care of her, how to care for her well. So the starter kit, and we'll share the links later on, but the starter kit may be found on our website, Kkua Mau website, also on the Conversation Project. It's 9 questions. The 9 questions, they don't start with CPR, because that's a really hard place to start. But this is a sample of some of the questions that they go. As a patient, I'd like to know only the basics about my condition and treatment, or I want to know everything, all the details. Or you could be somewhere in between. And really, just having this as a kind of a framework of having a conversation, this can really facilitate a robust conversation. I encourage you to go and take a look. There's 9 questions. There may be a few that you'd have to stop and contemplate a little bit on, but I assure you they won't be scary questions. And then who would benefit from knowing your answers? Who would benefit from knowing how you answered those questions, those 9 questions? Whether it's a parent, a child, a partner, a sibling, your doctor, your friends, I say whoever would show up for you. If you had a medical crisis or serious illness and you found yourself in the hospital, in the ER, those are the people who would show up for you. And the ones who show up for you, I like to call them your tribe. Your tribe would benefit from knowing your answers because that's really why they're showing up. They want to support you. And how do they do that? Well, by sharing your answers, that gives them an opportunity to recognize how they can support you. The next would be, when is a good time to talk? When is a good time to share your answers? I'd like to tell you that soon is not a time. Let's talk soon does not work. But if you name a holiday, you name a date, it makes it more, you understand that that's the day it's going to happen. I like to share the story about Rosemary Lord. Reverend Rosemary, she actually came to visit us here in Hawaii, and she shared a story about when she was doing an end of life series in November. And so in November, she started doing these series, and she encouraged her parishioners to have these conversations with their loved ones. And one of her people came up to her and showed her an invitation for Thanksgiving dinner. And on it, it said the time, the date, and at the very bottom, it said, there will be no pie until you tell me how you want to die. And I thought that's just a fabulous way of introducing this conversation at an opportunity where people are together and making sure that it's not surrounding someone's illness. What a great thought, right? People who agreed to come to dinner, they knew what they were in for, that's for sure. And then you have to decide where would be a good place to talk. So the conversation starter kit, I can honestly say it's a relationship building tool. I have a friend who, her sister was an RN, and as an RN who worked at the hospital at Kaiser, she saw a lot of things. And because she had that nursing background, she knew exactly what she wanted and what she didn't want. And being diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, she recognized that she would be having to make hard decisions. But the family just couldn't get on board. They were fighting amongst themselves. They were fighting with sister who was actually facing the cancer. And so she asked me, what do I do with this? So I gave her a copy of the starter kit and I said, have the family sit down together and everyone read a question out and everyone give their answers. And not just focusing on Sissy with her cancer, but everybody sharing their own answers. So she called me up the next day and she said that was the best 2-hour conversation that our family has had in the last 6 months. At least now we understand why there was so much tension, but now better yet, we understand how to support Sissy through this journey. I really encourage you, if you're having a challenge with having these conversations, this is a great place to start. I do recommend that you let people know that this is the topic that you'll be talking about. It is a challenging one that sometimes gets stopped before it's even started. This is why we really encourage people to do this when they're healthy, rather than when they're facing an illness or a diagnosis. So if you have the opportunity to go through this, share your answers with your loved ones. It'll better help them to understand what kind of decisions you might be choosing when you create your advance directive. Another tool that I like to share with folks is the Go Wish cards. They're actual cards that you could purchase if you wanted to, but Go Wish actually set up a free version that you can do online. And if you're able to look good at these cards, you'll notice that these cards have themes, which oftentimes we're not really thinking about when we're creating our advance directive. To keep my sense of humor, to have close friends near, to maintain my dignity, to take care of unfinished business, to have my family with me. All these thoughts, these are things that really, it gets you really thinking about what matters most to you. And if you decide to do it online, their digital version looks like this. So you would actually pull a card from the deck and you would decide in which category that card would fit in. So to have a doctor who knows me as a whole person. How important that is that to you? It can be either not important, somewhat important, or very important. If you're healthy, and I should back up, you'll notice on this, there's 10 slots for very important cards, right? Somewhat important has 20, not important has 20. So there's a lot of slots where you could put your thing, but notice that you have a limited number of very important things. Now, when I do this in the community, and these are healthy individuals, I tell them, if you're healthy and you're comfortable with the challenge, whittle that 10 down to 5. And if you can get it down to 5, try whittle it down to 3. And if you're really brave, whittle it down to 1. And the challenge there is to figure out what really is important to you and what do you really want to share with your loved ones. My husband's uncle, he's facing some serious illness right now. And my husband asked me to go and talk to him and auntie. So uncle and auntie, he said, can you talk to them? Because I think they need some help with this. So I went over and I talked to him and I gave him the cards. I said, okay, uncle, show me the ones that are very important to you. And I didn't ask him to whittle it down because he's facing serious illness. So he sorted them out and I took a picture of it and I sent the copy to one of his sons. And the son said, oh, that's great. Can you show that to auntie? Because I don't think she knows this. And I kind of got the idea of the dynamics there, that there was very kind of he was frustrated with her. She was frustrated with him. So I showed her the cards, and she kind of gave me this funny look and she said, that's not important. Why would that be important? How come he thinks that important? And I said, okay, this is why they're having some caregiving issues and there's head bumping here. So I took that opportunity and I said, no, auntie, maybe it's not important to you, but he's the one in the patient seat right now. So these are the things that are really important to him. And you could see the light click on because she just kind of went, oh, and it kind of started a dialogue. It gave that opportunity to fix the headbutting that was going on and kind of have that conversation between the two of them so that they could understand how he could be better supported by her. So I encourage you to take a stab at the gowish.org. You have the opportunity to print your session. You can do it multiple times if you'd like. Again, that's a free tool that's online. And really what you're doing when you're having these conversations and trying to figure out what you want, what you don't want, what you're really hoping to do with that is, if the unexpected happened, who would speak for you? And would they know what you would want? Or possibly what you don't want? And it's funny because I've done these presentations with some senior clubs, and sometimes I'll have people say, oh yeah, my kids, they know exactly what I want. And I'll respond, oh great, so that means you've had these conversations. And they kind of look at me and they go, well, no. Like, well, maybe it's better that you tell them what you want instead of letting them have to guess. Because right now you're assuming that they know what you want. And if they're put in that position, they're really guessing. And guilt can weigh heavily on people when they're asking the question, did I make the right decision? This is a gift. Having these conversations is really a gift. It's an opportunity to ensure your loved ones reassurance that what they're doing is in your best interest because you've told them. So I really encourage these conversations to talk about it. And really, you want to know who resonates with what you're saying. Who do you think would be your best advocate? You're looking for that person, your champion, your advocate, the person that's going to help to ensure that your wishes are met. And so when do you have these conversations? Well, we're really encouraging people to do it from age 18. We're encouraging folks at 18 to do an advanced directive. So as you notice, it's not an age thing, right? It's an adult thing. And really, we want to make sure that people recognize that having that advanced directives, it ensures that no matter what happens, you've thought about who is your person that you trust to make your choices if you're unable to speak for yourself. That's your healthcare power of attorney. It's also called your healthcare agent. Some states, they'll call that your proxy. I like to refer to that as your advocate or your champion or just your person. Having these conversations help you to recognize who that would be. And then throughout life, you want to keep visiting the conversation, whether it's a medical crisis or checking every 10 years, every 5 years, every couple of years, looking at major life events as kind of a trigger to look at your advance directive, whether it's going off to college, getting married, having children, getting a divorce, a death in the family. We've actually had social workers come up to me and tell me, thank you for reminding me to go and look at my advance directive, because my advance directive named my ex-husband and my new husband would not be happy with that. So I did make updates. So we encourage people to come back to this. Think of it as a living document, something that's going to change as your what matters to you changes. Throughout life, things will change, right? And then again, when you're diagnosed with a serious illness or a new diagnosis comes up, then you want to review the conversation again. So just a little bit of more on what I was saying earlier about next of kin. So everyone over the age of 18 really should have an advance directive. And without an advance directive, if the person is unable to speak for themselves, whether it's because of dementia or they're not conscious and they're not able to, what will happen is that a meeting will be called. And the doctor is going to call a meeting. Social workers are going to try and find whomever is interested in having the conversation with all the people who love you. They're going to gather them all up. And those folks who have shown up for this meeting have to come to an agreement as to who's in charge. Now, that can be a challenge. That really can, because you may have the granddaughter who's been the caregiver for the last 10 years and the oldest daughter who's been away for the last 25 years. And the oldest daughter coming in with guilt and wanting to take over things. We call that the seagull syndrome. They fly in from the mainland, drop a lot of poop all over everybody, and they fly out. That's the seagull syndrome. So it could be the granddaughter who's been caring for that individual for the last 10 years and her aunt fighting amongst each other. This is why we really want to encourage you to at least choose your agent, because if those people are unable to come to an agreement, it could mean going to court for guardianship case. Guardianship is expensive and it could take 6 months or more, especially now during COVID. It could take even longer to actually come to a conclusion. So during that time, that individual is in limbo. All the while, the granddaughter who's been taking care of her for the last 10 years, who lives with her, probably has the best idea of how or what she would want, but just has never been named or appointed as the agent. So I always say, think of the loudest person in your family showing up for you during a health crisis. That's probably the one who's going to win. Now, in my family, I am often the loudest one in the family. It doesn't necessarily mean I know what that individual's wishes are. So it's really important to give that gift to your loved one, at least to name your agent. If that's the only thing you do in your advance directive, that's still something more than coming into this situation without some sort of plan in place. We like to think of it as healthy planning. So oftentimes I'll have kupuna come up to me and tell me, I get them all planned. I have my burial plot. I picked up my coffin. I made a program with all the songs I want sung and the Bible verses I want shared. I got all that stuff. I got my maki box all set up. My kids don't have to worry about anything, which is great. However, that only kicks in once you've died. So really what we're talking about here is, how do you live well all the way up until the time of death? How do you ensure that you're living well all the way up until the time of death? And that would be through advanced care planning, having these conversations, and ensuring that your loved ones know how to support you. So I'm gonna take a quick check-in. If there's anybody who has questions, feel free to put them in the chat, where I'm happy to take any questions about the conversation part of that. And Kim, if you see anything come up, just feel free to let me know, okay?
Okay, will do.
Thanks. How do we make sure that our wishes are known? What do we do about that? How do we make sure that our loved ones know how to support us? Well, one of the best ways we can do that is through an advance directive. This is the copy. This is what our advance directive looks like on Kōkua Mau's website. There are many different healthcare directives that are out there. They may look different depending on where you get your care for or where you got your form from. We encourage folks to use ours because it's only 3 pages. And you do have the opportunity to write everything in as you would want. But any advance directive is helpful. It doesn't matter what it is. I would say if you're going to a lawyer to have your advance directive done, save yourself some time and money and tell them, no, that's okay, I'll do my own. Because they will charge you for writing that advanced healthcare directive. And oftentimes we hear from providers, from physicians, it's too much to go through during a time of crisis. It's a lot of reading. So save yourself the time, save yourself the money, do an advance directive, because really you want to be able to update that from time to time. And by doing it yourself, instead of paying a lawyer to do it, you're actually helping your loved ones to hear it in your own words. So the advance directive, it needs to be done when you're of sound mind. So this is why, if there are any dementia planners out there, get on your advance directive and have it done. What this document does is twofold. So the first part of it is it names your healthcare power of attorney. It names your agent, your person, your champion. It names the person that you trust to speak when you are unable to. And then the second part is what we've called the living will section of it. It gives instructions for your healthcare power of attorney, for your person. It's kind of a roadmap for them on how to make decisions on your behalf. So the first part is naming your agent, your healthcare power of attorney. Again, how do you decide who that is? Well, you want to be having these conversations. You want to make sure that they know what is important to you. So someone who's familiar with your personal values and willing and able to make decisions. Someone who you've had this conversation with and is willing to be your advocate. It doesn't need to be a family member. In fact, it can be a friend, it can be a trusted neighbor, it can be anybody who you trust that is willing to take on that responsibility. And then you want to select an alternate, because what happens if you're in a car accident and your person is next to you in the car? So you want to have that backup, right? The part 2 is just recognizing when the document takes effect. And the biggest part is when I've lost the ability to communicate my wishes regarding my care. Let's say I've had a hiking accident, a surfing accident. Something has incapacitated me that I cannot speak for myself. This is when this document can take effect. There are some other times as well, when you're nearing the end of life. So when you have an incurable or irreversible condition that would result in my death within a relatively short time, or if the risks and burdens of treatment would outweigh the expected benefits. So this document, it kind of has something has to trigger it for it to go into effect. But if you're working with someone who they want you to have the opportunity to speak on their behalf, you can actually check it and say it goes into effect immediately. So I have some seniors who say, why wouldn't I do that? It's like, it's totally up to you. If you want your loved ones to be able to call and get information about what's going on with you, then you can check it immediately. And those people who you've named as your agents, they have the authority to ask on your behalf. So this is part 2. The next part is your choice to prolong or not prolong life. Now, I really want to slow down and talk about this part, because I want to stop or hold medical treatment that would prolong my life, or I want medical treatment that would prolong my life as long as possible within the limits of generally accepted healthcare standards. What does all of that mean, right? I mean, what does that really mean? So if we're choosing the first one, it means I know what's happening, but please don't try extraordinary measures. I'd much rather be in my home setting. I don't want to be trying things to prolong my life. And that would usually mean that you're in a hospital setting, because if I want medical treatment that would prolong my life as long as possible within the limits of generally accepted healthcare standards, that would mean that you're willing to have medical intervention. You're possibly willing to find yourself in the ICU. If you've ever visited somebody in the ICU, you know there's a lot of things going on. They call it the intensive care unit because they're really focusing on keeping you alive. They're trying to get you better so they can take you out of intensive care. Really, intensive care could include breathing machines. It could include tube feedings, all types of medical interventions. And really, generally accepted healthcare standards has changed throughout the years. So the medical field is actually able to keep people alive much longer with the use of medical interventions. So it's really a personal thing that you want to sit down and think about. Where would you want to get care at the end of your life? Where would you want to be at the end of your life? Would you be okay with being on machines, or would you rather be at home? Would you want them to try everything because you have a grandbaby coming up and you want to meet them soon? Your what matters to you might change depending on what's going on around you. But this is a really it's a really good question for you to think about. What would you want and what wouldn't you want? And where would you want to be? The second part is on artificial nutrition and hydration. It gives the opportunity to say, yes, I'd like artificial nutrition and hydration. And in the ER, in the ICU, when it's a temporary setting, my mom, mom had Parkinson's, she had congestive heart failure, she had some mild dementia, and she also had really bad arthritis. So in her documents, she said, yes, please try. So as a temporary means of tube feeding, what they do is they go up the nose, down the throat, and into the belly. They insert the tube that way. And then the formula is fed that way. Now there is a permanent means of getting artificial nutrition and hydration, and that requires an operation where they actually stick a peg, they call it a peg, into your belly so that they can feed you directly into your belly. But in mom's case, she had a temporary one, and it's called an NG tube, nasogastral tube. So when the nurse came in, and they're going off her documents because she said she wanted it. So the way she wound up in the ICU is that she hadn't taken her Parkinson's medications. And we're not sure how long she hadn't taken her Parkinson's meds. But with Parkinson's, what happens is motor functions kind of get messed up with Parkinson's. So she didn't have a good way of swallowing. So because she hadn't taken her meds, she hadn't eaten. Because she hadn't eaten, she started getting weak. She had a fall, and they wound up taking her to the ER. So going off of her documents, she said she wanted artificial nutrition and hydration. And so when the nurse came in, their hope was to get her a little bit stronger, so maybe she could possibly get those pills down. Nurse came in, they put the tube feeding in, up the nose, down the throat, into the belly, and she immediately said, get it out. And so they said, oh, what's happening? She's like, it hurts, get it out. They took it out. They said, okay, we'll try it again a little bit later. They came back and they tried it again. And she immediately said, get it out. It hurts. The third time the nurse came in, she looked him in the eye and she said, get out of here. I don't want that. So I'm thankful that mom was able to direct her care, because she was able to tell me that she didn't want it anymore. But I needed to make sure she understood what that meant. And she understood that that meant, yes, that was the only means that she was going to get any nutrition, and she was okay with what's about to come. And so I wanted to make sure she really understood it, because one, she hadn't had food for a few days. Two, she didn't have any of her dementia medications. And she looked me in the eye and she said, I understand. I'm not going to get food. I'm not going to, it means without food, I'll die. I said, okay, as long as we're all both on the same page. I was her champion in that my aunt, her sister, wanted to get her on the tube feeding. Said, why don't we put her a tube feeding to her belly? Said, she's already made her decision. And I know, had I not backed mom up, it could have become kind of a tug of war between the two of them. But whenever you're following an advance directive, it's important to note that as long as you are still able to speak for yourself, you are still in charge of the care that you're receiving. So, nutrition and hydration, relief from pain. In some cases, it can help. People can live for long lives with a permanent tube feeding. In other cases, it may not be helpful. It is a personal decision, and it's something that I strongly encourage people to consider for themselves first. Had mom been had she been unresponsive, I would have gone off of documents, and her documents said to do a temporary trial for 6 weeks, not knowing that it was uncomfortable for her. So this is a gift by telling them what you want so that they don't have to guess, because otherwise they'll have to actually make a decision for you, what you would want, what you wouldn't want. And if your family, one, doesn't have a spokesperson, there will probably be a lot of infighting about opinions, right? Because people want to do what's best, but they don't always know how to do what's best. So this is, again, is part of the gift. Section C and D is about relief from pain. This is whether you'd want pain management, pain medications, and it's a personal choice. And then in the section E of part 2, this is when you get to put it in your own words. What makes life meaningful? What kind of trial support would I want? This is where you can say, hey, if I can't watch my Korean soaps and eat a steak, let's not worry about doing extraordinary measures. Or if I have dementia, don't worry about my cholesterol. Let me enjoy life. You won't have to fight me when I don't want to take my pills. This is an opportunity to give your expectations. What would a good day look like for you? And share that with your agent so that they can support you in whatever decisions you may need to make on the healthcare journey. In order to have this document legal, it needs to be signed by a notary or 2 witnesses. It must be someone who's 18 years or older. It cannot be somebody who works in the place where you are receiving care. So it can be a challenge if you don't do this while you're healthy and you find yourself in a hospital faced with trying to do this. Can be a challenge to get witnesses. And one of the witnesses cannot be a relative or have inheritance rights. So I encourage you to do this early while you're healthy, so you don't have to worry about witnesses or worry about how am I going to get it notarized. Then what do you do with it? So you make copies for your physician's office so that they can either put it in the EMR, make copies and have it in your chart, make copies for your healthcare agents. And that may be 2 different agents. Make sure that they know who's the number 1 agent and who's the number 2 agent. Tell your loved ones that you've done a document and you've named your agent. And you can tell them, hey, I love you guys. I respect you guys. I appreciate all you guys do. When you guys show up and mama is sick, don't worry. Auntie Lani, I've already talked to her. She's going to be in charge. So when you guys show up, you just show up and be with me. Auntie Lani will make all the hard decisions for you. That in itself can stop fighting from ever starting. And then you want to review it regularly. Again, this should be a living document that you're actually carrying throughout life. changing it, adapting it to whatever suits your current state. I'll open it up if you guys have questions. We've got about 10 minutes left, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have challenges with the conversations. I'm just going to go through the last of my slides so that you see some of the resources that we have. If you find that you would like to share this information with other people, maybe you have a church group, book club, maybe you have a bunch of cousins and you guys are all at that age where you want to talk about this, we're happy to do this via Zoom. In this type of thing, you can come on, we can figure out what's most important to you. We have different types of presentations available. So this one was just on the conversation and the document. We have other presentations that include what POST is. They talk about hospice or palliative care. What's the difference? We even have on Our Care, Our Choice Act, the medical aid in dying presentation. We're happy to tailor whatever the presentation is so that you get what you need from that. But by all means, feel free to let us know if you would like to join us or you would like us to join you for a meeting. Again, we are a membership organization, so we invite you if you're interested to become a member and support us in the work that we do. We are more than happy to have you join our movement to improve care. These resources have been translated into 10 different languages. We are still working at getting Hawaiian language translated for this, but everything else that the top 10 languages, I think from 10 years ago, these were all translated into that. So feel free to take a look at what else is available on our website. If you have questions, this is I'm Hope, and you can reach me at that phone number or the email. Kkua Mau, we are kokuamau.org. You can find all the information there. And I will open it up to any questions or comments that you all may have. Kim, did you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, you did such a great job of presenting. Even the questions I had as coming up as I was writing to myself, you then answered them. There were a couple things that just came up, thoughts. Do you have any recommendation as to whether people should update their advanced directive in relation to COVID and some of the issues with the pandemic?
This is a good time to review what you already have. It's a good time to revisit the conversation. We have people who are adding riders onto their advanced directives and saying during times of COVID, these are the things that I would want, these are the things I wouldn't want. I really think it's a challenge because if you already have some sort of diagnosis, it might be harder for you to consider it. I know they're doing care very differently in the hospital settings. So if you need to go to a hospital, it is highly likely that whomever wants to be there with you is not going to be able to be in the room with you. And that's something to really consider, especially if you're in an advanced stage of an illness, or if the individual has dementia. We've heard stories about people with dementia going into a hospital and they are really having a hard time because one, it's disorienting. It's not normal. It's not someplace they won't have their caregiver around. I mean, a lot of things to think about. I would start with a conversation with the agents and just kind of let them know where you stand with things. If there is a decision that, hey, I don't want to go to the hospital, that's when you want to talk to your provider or your doctor about getting a post. And that way you can stay out of a hospital setting, but still receive some care. I think, thankfully, we don't have the same problems that are happening on the mainland with beds maxing out. But I think because a lot of your people are in the Big Island and there's not as many facilities nearby, it's really important to have these conversations with regards to what limitations would you want if you have to go to the hospital. Would you be comfortable staying in a hospital? I know people are saying, I don't even want to be in a hospital because of COVID. they're scared of catching COVID in the hospital setting. It is something to think about. It's something that you want to have deeper conversations. And it could just be something along the lines of, hey, if I have a stroke, don't leave me at home. I want to go to the hospital. I know COVID, but they have medications that could get me up and out of there quicker if they get me early. It could be more in depth, like, hey, you know, I have asthma. And you know, when that fog gets to me, sometimes I have to go to the hospital and be on the machine, and they have to help me with that. So that's an opportunity to talk with your doctor more in depth about what that could affect, what effect that could be for your personal healthcare needs. Great question. I don't see any chats. They're all quiet out there.
Doing such a good job. One other question. So I know I've seen this a lot personally in like the hospital setting, both here on island and on the mainland. So if someone's traveling, say, and they're away from family, so they don't have anyone with them, and something happens and they go into the hospital and they're not responsive. And so in experiences, you don't necessarily right away know who those contacts are, or know who advanced health their care directive is, or agent, sorry. Do you have a recommendation as far as, do people have something like in their wallet that would, you know, say who their agent is, or anything of that sort?
So there's a couple of things. If they're really concerned about it, always having a copy either on their phone, a digital copy on their phone. There's a website called mydirectives.com, and they actually have a digital version floating out there in the cloud that you can access at any time. So if they see that you have My Directives on your phone, then they could put your name in and try and find out. The other thing that you can do is, the next time you're getting your driver's license renewed, or your state ID renewed, there's a designation that you can add on there. And all it is, so the part where they say check the box because you want to be an organ donor, there's a second box next to it that says, I have an advanced healthcare directive. You can check it. Now, there's no repository where we're keeping all of these advanced directives, but by checking that kind of triggers, okay, so let's look for the emergency contact and get them started on finding out who's on that advanced directive, because they said they have it. Let's get as many, all hands on deck. Let's get as many people trying to find who's going to be in charge. So it can be a challenge when you travel, but you know, there are means to making sure that your wishes can be known.
Great, thank you. Those are great resources.
Okay.
All right.
Well, your audience is quiet.
I think I'll put up the final screen here then. If no other questions are coming through. I'd just like to thank everybody who came to join today, and thank you, Hope. This was so many pearls in what you shared, and such an important conversation topic that really, like you said, it can be the greatest gift to have this conversation for families and loved ones. And to those who are here, if you have any questions, feel free, you can reach us at our website, ldwellness.org. Please tell others about our organization. We're new, we're grassroots, we're growing, and we really want to support the community. So we appreciate you telling your friends and families and people who you think might benefit from our services. You can join our mailing list, again, at ldwellness.org. And if you would like to donate, that is also very much appreciated, so that we can continue to support the community.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for all you guys are doing over there on the Big Island.
Yeah, we're very committed to it. So thank you for showing up to assist.
Thanks, Catherine. I appreciate that.
All right. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time. And just a reminder, we do have webinars every month as well. So The next webinar, I believe, is around, I think it's March, I believe it's March 23rd. Please check our website, but it's around COVID and mental health issues that are kind of coming up around the whole pandemic and what we're going through as a community and a society. So we look forward to hopefully seeing you there.